This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Daily Digest with me, T. Xiao Ik and Juliet Jacobs. This hour, we have two stories for you. First up, how are parents coping with educating their children at home during this movement control order? The stay-at-home period is exposing some of the flaws in our society when it comes to helping parents manage, and as a result, parents are feeling extremely guilty. So we'll be discussing that.
Yes, and in our second story, most of us have an inner critic, that voice in your head that's always a negative Ned or Nancy, criticizing the way you look, the way you talk, and constantly comparing yourself to other people. So we ask an expert if isolation can make this inner critic louder, and we'll also discuss ways we can cope with it. And, in light of both of our stories, talking about our feelings and how we're coping through this time, we're asking you over on Twitter, is the movement control order making you feel bad about yourself? All that self-criticism or negative thoughts. So take that poll. You can always, you can take that poll, tweet us at BFM Radio. You can send us a WhatsApp message at 018-789-8899 or, just let us know how you're getting through these times.
Yes. So our first story is about how parents are coping. So I read an article on Medium over the weekend that simultaneously broke my heart, yet made me feel somewhat comforted. I know, quite a contradiction there. So it was written by Chloe Cooney. She's an advocate for feminism, global health and human rights. She wrote a candid essay about her parenting struggles during this lockdown period in the US where she lives, and she called it "The Parents Are Not All Right." So she described her work from home routine where she and her partner are going from work calls to juggling their to-do lists, and in the midst of all that, trying to be parents as well. So she writes that while her partner was trying to manage the homeschooling shift for their son, he, on the other hand, huddled in an increasingly secure couch fort, refusing to do anything, color, read, go outside, even talk to his teacher, besides sit in silence in the dark or watch his iPad. So that description and many other parts of her essay was kind of really what broke my heart. But at the same time, I also felt kind of heartened because it showed that I'm not alone in all this guilt that I'm feeling as a parent.
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that, that your child just not listening to you. My goodness, I think a lot of us are going through that. And Connie came to that realization too, that the guilt of a parent. She wrote that their struggles are echoed in chats and social media posts within their circles. She said, "We feel like we're failing at both working and parenting. Our kids don't just need us, they need more of us. Our kids are acting out, they're abandoning the routines they already had, they're dropping naps, sleeping less, doing less, except for jumping on top of their parents, which is happening much more." I think we can both relate to that. And we're letting them watch far greater amounts of screen time than we ever thought we'd tolerate.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and forget homeschooling success. Most of us are struggling to get our kids to do the basics that would have accounted for a Saturday morning routine before this pandemic.
Yes, and this is not an unfamiliar scenario for many parents stuck in some form of lockdown or stay-at-home situation anywhere around the world today due to COVID-19. So what used to be water cooler conversations at the office about our parenting problems have been replaced by chat group rants, underscoring a new kind of parental stress for many of us, I think, which is educating our own children.
Yeah, and of course we'll admit that this is a privileged perspective, which Cooney herself acknowledged too. The parents who can say this are those who still have jobs they can do at home, who have access to education resources, and who don't have to worry about putting food on the table. But, that doesn't mean that parents in this situation are coping either. In fact, as you said earlier, the parents are not doing okay. This pandemic has exposed the flaws in our society where work and family lives were previously separated, and we were not allowed to let one cross into the other.
And now both have clashed, right? I mean, sort of that divide has completely collapsed. Yeah. And it's individual parents and families who have to bear this burden because while the institutions are still there to support us, the way that they can support us has changed drastically. So schools are a very good example of that. So earlier today, I spoke to Dr. Vincent Chian, principal of Fairview International School, Kuala Lumpur, for his perspective as an educator on how parents can manage during this MCO period. So I started by asking him, what are the challenges that parents are facing with educating their children at home right now?
So I think the primary challenge that parents have to manage, primary challenges are that they need to ensure that children don't fall behind academically. That's a really big concern. emotionally managing the home environment, and then fulfilling the role of parents as breadwinners, keeping in mind, of course, the economic situation. It's doubly difficult for mothers. I hear a lot of complaints from mothers that their fathers are not quite as participative, because there's this common social expectation that moms are there to take care of the children and dad just sit back and earn money, which is a little bit challenging right now during these times. So usually moms will take on an additional role of being a full-time teacher during the RMO, which is very, very tough. Yeah.
Can you give us an idea of how your school, for instance, is continuing education for your students?
So at Fairview International School, we've continued with education as normal using a combination of online classes, flipped learning. It's a concept, a pedagogical concept where you don't focus on doing lots of homework, but instead do a lot of learning of simple content before the class. So it's kind of like preparing for class. And then we also have tutorials to help anybody who's having a little bit of challenge in certain specific areas. And we have hotline sessions where parents can call in at any time or children can call in to get a little help on any random issue whatsoever. That plus a host of other pastoral support mechanisms.
Yeah, I mean, the main challenges for parents now are that assuming the role of a teacher, of an educator is very different from what you usually do as a parent. What do you think are the inherent flaws in this presumption that parents can handle education on top of everything else?
I'm not sure about flaws in the assumption, but I have two concerns about this situation, about parents being teachers. Firstly, teaching is a skill. And just like any other skill, including medicine, it involves expertise, which you have to learn and then put into practice to perfect. Designing a class, understanding the right way to approach or share a topic, assessing progress. There's a difference between regular information sharing and educating, and we need to understand the boundaries between these two processes. This I would say when it comes to parents, be they doctors, lawyers, engineers, sometimes love is just not enough. Love and sharing doesn't equal educating. There is a lot more to that. And the second challenge and concern that I have is there may be role confusion. My parent, my father and mother is my role model. The person that gives me love, provides for, and nurtures me. If you add on the role of an educator, that can be really conflicting for a child. An educator is there to facilitate learning, to challenge, to hold accountable, and prepare the students for the challenges of the world. They're not meant to be your best friend. They're not even meant to be nice to you sometimes. But they're there to make sure that you learn. And those roles may conflict when you try and overlap that with the role of a parent. Unless you're highly skilled at weaving between the roles, it may prove very challenging for most parents.
So as an educator then, what's your advice for parents to navigate these conflicts, I suppose?
Oh, to be parents. It's more than enough. Role model how to be creative and positive. Role model how to care and build family relationships. Role model how to give and receive love. Your teachers will set tasks, and your children will try their best to stay focused. Everyone is going to make mistakes. Role model forgiveness and kindness. Creating an environment that feels safe for your children to make mistakes, and show them yours too. You're just as human as everyone else is. And love and kindness beats discipline and fear any day. Don't ever resort to that frustrated backhand smack. Your family needs you now more than ever. And of course, put your phones away.
That last one's a tough call. I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? Parents, especially who are also managing working from home, need to be online and on call to their employers, perhaps their clients as well. Even teachers who are working from home and also teaching their students at this time are especially pressed, I would think. is it okay for there to be some slack in terms of completing the homework, checking everything in the box, and is it okay for there to be some give during this period?
Absolutely. Distance learning is a skill that takes both the learner and the educator time to perfect. Most of our teachers, the large majority, do not have this skill perfected. They're not going to be able to deliver it to perfection. On top of that, the learner skill is also another area we're going to have to perfect, that focus, that discipline, that habits. These on both sides, from the learning and from the educator's point of view, it takes time to perfect. Homeschoolers have done it for years. The true homeschoolers, not those that go to tuition centers, but those who really live in the middle of nowhere and do the proper homeschooling. It takes a while, 6 months to a year, to get the pattern and the rhythm right. We are not going to get it right in this short period of time. But I would place this statement: never prioritize academic expectations over the emotional well-being of your child. The long-term consequences are much worse. In my previous life, I used to train in psychiatry and medicine. And I've seen all the consequences of parents that prioritize academic expectations or social expectations over the emotional well-being of a child. Let's do our best. But at the end of the day, we need to recognize that this will never replace the educational experience that a child receives being in a school with his friends, running around, screaming, with a teacher there to guide and hold their hand. It just doesn't replace that.
But there's also practical expectations. So for students, for example, who are in an exam year, how do we manage the expectations?
I believe that many of those on the decision-making board of these exams are parents themselves. And I'm aware of most of those conversations regarding how do we continue to conduct examinations during this time period, including the Malaysian systems and the international ones. Most of these individuals are very concerned that they may not be able to conduct it. And secondly, their candidates will not be readily prepared for this as well. I believe in having faith that people are quite sensible at the end of the day, and that those who are looking at the situation, I do believe that they understand that this is not a normal situation, and we cannot expect normal outcomes to happen here.
Just one last question, Dr. Vincent, and I'm going to put you on the spot a bit, because earlier you mentioned about mothers sort of disproportionately bearing the emotional burden of the schooling at home. It resonates with me because I'm a mother as well. What's your message to fathers during this time?
Wow, that's a cruel one. Well, me and my wife both work in a school, so we're both very accustomed to this. I suppose the only real message that would make any sense is everybody has to pull their weight. Apply yourself where your strengths are. I would never go for an equal distribution because I don't believe that equal is equal. But I would say everybody has a different strength. And you need to find your strength and contribute so that the family stays strong. So it's not enough to sit back and say, I don't have anything to contribute. You need to find it and actively determine how you can be a part of this family. That would be the suggestion I have for fathers. And mothers, just recognize that sometimes there's some things that daddies don't do very well. Mothers are better at some things than daddies are. And we need to play to our individual strengths. Have that conversation. These are great times to have family meetings and to discuss these important issues about how we all contribute together to keep our family strong.
So that was Dr. Vincent Chian, principal of the Fairview International School here in Kuala Lumpur. So the caveat to this part of the conversation, of course, is that private and international schools have different levels of resources and they can provide different opportunities to their students. But we need to widen the scope of our discussion, of course, and acknowledge that perhaps just apart from a small handful of high-achieving public schools, this kind of learning may not be able to benefit the average Malaysian student. But to give credit to public schools, I've heard from some of my friends whose kids are in government schools, many teachers are trying their best. They are sending worksheets to students and they are remaining open to communication with parents and kids via chat groups during this period.
Yeah, I think everyone is just trying their best to figure
their
this
best.
out,
That's right.
right?
Yep.
And to do the best for everyone involved. But there is also an abundance of online resources that are freely accessible during this period, such as OutSchool, the Khan Academy, Scholastic, and many more. There are also educational YouTube channels your kids can watch, like the Science Channel, there's Nat Geo Kids, and Kids Learning Tube. And here's one parent, Tan Mei Lee, weighing in on how useful these online resources are.
Online learning has been great and effective for older children, especially for my 8 and 10-year-old child. However, I feel that for younger children, especially for my younger one at 6 years old, it requires a different approach with minimal online learning, but more hands-on homeschooling type of learning. The second point is in the midst of online learning being the new trend and the new normal now, we must also be mindful that there is a digital divide where there are some households who may not have enough devices or may not even have access to devices at all. Thirdly, I feel that digital detox time is very important so that children don't stay on the computer for too long. And after the online learning, homework should be limited because this may pose a burden to both the child as well as the parents.
So Mei Lee made a crucial point there, where online learning relies on families having internet or data access and some form of hardware, whether it's a computer, a tablet, or a smartphone. And as we know, there are still vast disparities in Malaysia in terms of access to technology, among many other things.
Yep. And for those of us who are fortunate to have the technology, these resources still remain unread in many of our inboxes. I know I'm guilty of that. What I found is that, it's one thing to have the resources, but it's quite another to find the time and the energy to use them. There's all these great ideas, creative projects and experiments, virtual this and that, games. The problem is that they need your undivided attention.
Exactly.
Your kids aren't going to sit down and bake cupcakes on their own, and all these things are great. I don't deny it. But in between juggling the video calls, meeting the deadlines that we still have to meet, household chores, and we talked about this in a previous Daily Digest as well, right? How are you managing your work from home schedule? Unfortunately, I feel the kids kind of get neglected.
A little bit. I think it's almost inevitable.
Yes.
Again, like we said, this is unprecedented times. That phrase has been used so much, and it truly is. Nobody's had to deal with this kind of situation in a very long time. But, Cooney, in her essay, warns against making the assumption that parents have settled into a routine with these few weeks into social distancing. She says that things have actually become harder due to our collective stress, exhaustion, and guilt. All things I can relate with. And yet it's not something that can be solved by tweaks to the schedule or helpful routines and all these virtual activities. So she writes, this current situation is almost prophetically designed to showcase the farce of our societal approach to separating work and family lives. We are expected to work from home full-time and care for our children full-time. And we cannot have anyone outside our immediate household help. It can't work, and we are all suffering at the illusion that it does.
So some people may argue, well, your kids, your problem.
Okay.
Maybe that's true, but really that's a very, very limited tunnel vision kind of view. Collectively, society will suffer if parents aren't coping and if children aren't coping because most immediately our work is suffering, and then our children aren't getting the best that they should be. They aren't getting that bonding that they need with us. They aren't getting the education, and I don't mean academic education, but just everything that an educational experience can give you, including social engagement. So if this pandemic demands that we rethink our future and change our behaviors, we actually need to be raising a generation of kids with the resilience and values to lead the way and who won't be cowed by this crisis.
Yeah, I think the word resilience, that is something that all of us really need to...
Which is being tested in us right now. Yeah. And I feel like I'm failing in that sense.
So do I. But again, we won't know until we've tried it, I suppose. We won't know how strong we are until we've faced the situation. And of course, we're going to fail along the way. But I think, as long as your child is still functioning.
Functioning.
I think that's
setting the bar low.
My low bar. My child is still functioning and, she's still happy.
Happy, I think that's more important.
Yeah, she's a
because my guilt right now is that we are at home, but we are not necessarily present for them because for me, I know I'm always saying, can you give me this time? I need to work. And so I just keep pushing him away. The screen time is adding up, unfortunately. But I don't know, what do you think you'd like? I know both our kids are still young, they're not school going yet, but what do you think you'd like our kids to be learning during this period?
Strangely, I think I want them to learn to be resilient because they are not, they are also facing their own struggles in the sense that why can't we go out? Why can't I see grandpa? Why can't I do all these things, right? And, teaching them to cope with that. And that is the process that I'm going through right now, why we can't step out. I think that will make her and my daughter a much stronger person in the future. And, we've been saying that this is just the first pandemic of many to come, the new normal and all of that. So I'm hoping that from all of this, she just learns to be resilient.
Okay. Well, if any parents out there would like to share your thoughts with us, do tweet us at BFM Radio. You can also WhatsApp us at 018-789-8899. We're kind of going to continue exploring the issue of emotions. We're going to look at how you feel about yourself during this movement control order. That'll be coming up after the break. But first, here's Gloria Gaynor with that anthem for all parents everywhere now, I Will Survive.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.